You ever have an idea for a game and then it just drops into existence? That's exactly what my experience with OVRLRD was like. There I was, lamenting the lack of a comprehensive, detail-oriented virtual reality mech game, and coincidentally happened to have this game pop up on my radar not a day later. While there have been VR mech games already, they're almost universally not very good, not quite what I was looking for, or were multiplayer only and are basically dead now, or all of the above. OVRLRD is an early access indie VR game and the solo project of Niall. Evidently, he too was looking for a mech game that had the feeling of really being in control of a machine, with lots of physical buttons and doodads to press in order to work it. And so he set about to just make that a reality. I'd like to point out at this stage that I'm not being paid to promote this game or anything like that, and normally I wouldn't make a video about a game until it's left early access. But in this case, I'd like to spread the word a little if possible. The player is placed into the cockpit of the titular mechs. You're not the mech itself, you're a pilot. That means in order to operate the machines, you must physically flip switches, push buttons, and manipulate the joysticks. The startup sequence that every mission begins with is the perfect example and introduction to this concept. At first, you'll be clumsily and awkwardly fumbling through it. But after a while you get the hang of it, and eventually it becomes a matter of muscle memory. You'll be flipping those switches and hitting buttons without even thinking about it. Even ordering AI squad mates around is done in a physical and tactile manner with the radio. It can be a little hard to do in the heat of battle, but it's a neat touch. However, all this does mean there is a little bit of a learning curve. It's not massive, it's not an impenetrable game by any means, but it may take a play session or two before you really find your legs. I think getting good at this game is really an exercise of learning your mech and all of its functions. Like learning a real piece of machinery, your proficiency boils down to familiarity. You know shit's getting real when you have to flick some extra switches in the middle of a battle. You do get a few options to tweak how the interface responds to your gestures, as well as some gameplay oriented options. For example, I opted to turn off mech stability features because I ended up just not enjoying that mechanic in VR. There's also tweaks that you can make in your actual cockpit, like seat adjustment and the sensitivity of various gimbals. You'll be thrown up against a variety of enemies, from infantry to tanks to other mechs, using autocannons, guided missiles, lasers, artillery and more. Weapons have different ballistic profiles and properties that will require you to get a feel for, further reinforcing the aspect of learning your machine. Artillery in particular is an interesting experience. Far from the point-and-click artillery of some other games, you'll need to actually find your ranges and utilize secondary systems in your mech, such as deployable spotting drones, to hit your targets. While the weapon selection is already pretty solid, I would be interested to see the roster expanded. What's here at the moment is good and there's some mechanically interesting things, and there's also a decent spread of different types of weapons and equipment. But I'd maybe like to see some of the more esoteric stuff eventually too. For example, a programmable airburst shell could be really cool and would fit well with the kind of systems this game's got going on. Or maybe stuff that leans into the alternate history background lore some more with experimental Cold War weaponry, like Davy Crockett's for example. And speaking of that alternate history background, I do find that pretty fun and I'd like to see it expanded a bit someday. It's not a big element of the game at the moment, it's just given as fluff text in the mech's user manual, so it's actually quite easy to miss. But it's a neat detail and low-key humorous. It might be cool to eventually get some prequel missions or something taking place in that era with the retro mechs mentioned in the backstory. But that would be something for way further down the line, if at all. Due to the work-in-progress nature of the game though, there's some balancing issues that need to be ironed out. For example, enemy infantry feel pretty overpowered at the moment, and it feels like they can pump out more DPS than multiple tanks can. And they're also kind of hard to kill, even explosive weapons usually leave a few survivors. Some campaign missions can also be a little frustrating, with lots of objectives to defend things. The targets are usually very fragile and there's currently no feedback on how much health they have. However, that being said, the campaign is very much unfinished, so I'm not going to hold balancing or direction against the game at this stage. Additionally, time to kill and damage values are something that may be changing in the near future anyway, as the developers has been gathering feedback regarding that very topic and experimenting with different approaches. So again, I don't think it's something I can really hold against the game overall at this point. OVRLRD also features the ability to easily create custom content. User-generated levels and mech skins are both currently supported with handy in-game editors to facilitate the creation of them. The livery editor allows you to quickly paint up a mech with some basic but robust in-game editing options. But I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You can also save a livery and edit it outside of the game with your choice of image editing tool. The game just exports a normal PNG file that you can easily open. This allows you to come up with much more complex paint jobs and do practically anything you want. Save it and then have it there in the game. This is just a quick example on the screen where I slapped on a camo pattern from one of the Call of Duty games, I think, in GIMP real fast, and bam, there it is in game. The mission editor is similarly easy to use and pretty powerful, although I haven't really messed with it too much myself. Seems like there's support for a lot of different gameplay types here, and I could see people coming up with some really great stuff using this. Unfortunately, however, the mapping scene for the game doesn't seem to be very big at the moment. But hopefully that will change when more people start trying it and the game itself starts coming along more in terms of development. And it should be noted that OVRLRD is in heavy active development, and by a single person to boot. That means there's a lot that can and will change. There's a lot that's changed even over the course of making this video. Much of this footage is actually outdated now, and there's been a huge art pass among other things. Currently, a lot of major systems are being reworked, and that does mean that some things will break. However, there is the option to revert to some of the older builds should the need arise. But the thing I love about Niall's development process is that he is extremely candid about everything. He regularly posts updates on YouTube, Twitter, the Knockout forums, and the game's own Discord. I always find it cool to see games being built up like this, seeing the things that go into fleshing out an idea or system, and occasionally even seeing the things that don't work out. It's neat, and I appreciate a developer who is open about that kind of stuff. There's been some interesting experiments on the development end, but I won't hype unreleased stuff up too much in case it doesn't work out. Needless to say though, I don't think this is the kind of early access game that gets dumped and forgotten about. Overall, if you're interested in combat flight sims or mil sims, then this game will probably be right up your alley. And if you're into Battletech / Mech Warrior, you're probably also going to get a kick from it. Fans of the old Steel Battalion games will also be right at home here. But it is an early access game, and I understand that this fact might put some people off. It's unfinished and certain aspects can be a little buggy. I won't try to obfuscate that, and neither does the developer. However, it's an extremely good framework and already in a solid spot to build from. I also have confidence that the game is in good hands and will continue to grow and improve. There's already some cool stuff in the works. Again, the development process is pretty transparent, so you can get a peek at what's being worked on. This developer is clearly passionate, creative, and full of ideas which often see pretty speedy implementation, which I think are all extremely positive signs for the future of the game. The game does have a free demo available on Steam, so why not take it for a spin yourself? Nothing to lose by trying. As always, thank you for watching.